It's still cold and chilly outside, but tonight in my quilting room, I'm getting ready for warmer weather by making a faux Bargello quilt that's perfect for lazy summer days. So grab your sunglasses, your SPF, and your piecing potion, and let's make a picnic quilt. Hi, I'm Angela Walters from Quilting is My Therapy, you know, your favorite midnight quilter, and I love all things summertime, including picnic quilts. Now, when you think of a picnic quilt, the Bargello technique probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind. Bargello is a stunning technique that uses piece strips to make a quilt with a lot of movement. It's not a difficult technique. In fact, I've actually made it in an earlier episode of the Midnight Quilter. So if you want to see the up close and detailed version of that technique, be sure to check out that video. But tonight I'm going to cheat a little bit and get a head start with a fabric panel that lets me skip some of the piecing. So instead of piecing all the strips to begin my Bargello technique, I'm going to use this panel. I designed this panel using prints from my Flag Day collection. A lot of red, white, and blue patriotic inspired design. Trust me, this quilt is going to be so fast and fun to make. I can't wait to show you what it looks like. And if you want to make a Flag Day Bargello quilt with me, all you have to do is click the link in the description box or visit quiltingismytherapy.com. We have all the supplies you need to make this quilt. And while I guess it could be technically cheating, let's call it a hack, an efficient way to make a Bargello quilt. Well, whatever you call it, we got to get started by trimming it out. Before I can get started making my Bargello quilt, I need to trim out my panels by just cutting along the outer edges. Then, once we're done with that, I'm going to show you how the Bargello quilt comes together. But don't put your rotary cutter up yet, because we're going to be using this again real soon. And here's where the Bargello technique gets interesting. I'm going to take my panel and fold it in half, right sides together. And I'm going to align those top edges. From this point, I'm going to actually sew it together to make one big fabric tube. You might be wondering what a picnic quilt is anyway. I mean, in my mind, a picnic quilt is basically just any quilt that can go outside. It's the quilt that's seen dirt and grass. It's been to football games, soccer games. It's that quilt that we give somebody when they're sick and they might throw up. It's definitely not the quilt that we put away when company comes over, and it just might have a stain or two on it. But usually it's the most beloved quilt in the family because it's the one we actually let people use. Now, let's take our big tube and start cutting it into strips. What I love about a Bargello quilt, or even a faux Bargello like this one, is the way it goes together. It's so genius. So first I'm going to take this, I'm just going to fold it over a little bit, and I'm going to start cutting it into strips. These strips are key because they're going to be what makes up our Bargello quilt top. Nice and easy. Now, I wish I could say that I came up with the idea of the Bargello, or even the idea to use my fabric panel for a Bargello quilt, but I didn't. The genius behind this quilt is actually one of my employees, Wendy Morrow. She saw the panel and thought, hey, I can turn that into a Bargello quilt, and once I saw the finished quilt, I was like, that is amazing. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to repeat with the rest of the panels, and then we'll start making our strips. To get that Bargello effect for the strips, I'm going to strategically cut between different prints. So taking some of the strips, I'm actually going to just remove the stitching I put in there. And when I open it, you can see a beautiful panel. For the next strip, I'm going to open it up and cut in between these two fabrics right here. Using my rotary cutter, or I could use a pair of scissors, that's fine too. And then I'm going to open it up and lay it next to the first. I like to lay them out as I cut them because it just gives me a visual and it helps me see that I'm on the right track. And then for the next tube, I'm going to repeat, except just moving on down to the next fabric line. Opening it up and making that one. This quilt actually uses 8 different types of strips, so I'm going to keep making those by cutting the different fabrics. It's so fun when you can start to see that pattern design come out. Now I actually need several of each of these strips, so I'm going to repeat that, cutting more strips, and then strategically deconstructing them to make the individual strips of my fake Bargello. Once I've got all the strips cut out, it's time to start piecing the top portion of our quilt. Even though I got a little bit of a head start by using the panel instead of pieced strips, I still have to do some sewing, so it's not quite cheating, I would think. Well, I've laid out the first 5 strips. The sections of this quilt use a total of 15 strips, and I've laid out the first 5 here. This is where you can see that color start to move and it just looks amazing. Now I've double checked with the pattern to make sure the right strips were in the right placement. This technique is easy, but it is easy to get them switched up. But I think everything looks right, so I'm just gonna sew them together. Nothing too crazy here, just sewing some nice straight seams. Another reason that I like picnic quilts is that it's good to have a designated outdoor quilt. That way my family knows exactly which quilts can go outside. I mean, nobody wants to walk outside and see their paper-pieced Judy Niemeyer quilt out in the grass. Whew, that would just make the mean mommy come out. And since I'm using a printed panel instead of pieced strips, I'm not worried too much about those squares matching up. I'm just gonna get it as close as I can and know that once I'm done, I'm just gonna see that beautiful Bargello look. What I love about quilting is that there's so many different types of quilts. From your functional utility quilts, kind of like this picnic quilt, all the way up to your show quilts. Those stunning, over-the-top, beautiful quilts that just make me want to drool. And while I love all kinds of quilts, and I'm not trying to start any drama here, I'm definitely more of a functional quilt type of gal. And it's not because I don't like show quilts, it's just that I like making quilts that can be used and loved. I mean, I love looking at show quilts, and I'm in awe of the artistry that it takes to make them, but I just don't have that attention to detail to actually make one. I once met a quilter that spent 800 hours making her show quilt from beginning to end, and it looked like it. It was a stunning, beautiful quilt. But if I did actually make a quilt that took 800 hours, I don't even know what I would do with that. If I brought it home, I'd probably have to kick my family out. But what's funny is quilts can move around on that spectrum too. A quilt that I made that once was off limits might now be today's picnic quilt. But if I can make a quilt that looks stunning and difficult to piece, but it was actually really easy, well, I call that a win-win. Truthfully, it doesn't matter what kind of quilt you're making, it just matters that you quilt. I didn't name my blog Quilting is My Therapy all those years ago for nothing. Through the years, quilting has really helped get me through some tough times, been a part of celebrations, and it's just something I love doing. And there's the first section of my quilt. The other 2 sections of this quilt are made the same way by laying out strips and sewing them together. Let me grab those and I'll show you what they look like. Quilt is so big it won't hardly fit on my table, but once those 3 sections are laid out, that's where we see the beautiful Bargello look happening. It's just crazy to think that by sewing some strips together and cutting at designated spots, you can get the stunning Bargello quilt. And once I'm to this point, this quilt is almost done. I just need to finish sewing this together and make the bottom section, quilt, bind, you know, all that stuff. Now there will be a couple strips left over, but I can just set those aside for a future project or use them to make a pieced backing. So I'm gonna go get that all done and I'll show you what our finished faux Bargello quilt looks like. And voila, this quilt is finished. The bottom section of this quilt was assembled the same way as the top, except I just cut out a row of those squares. And the result is a quilt that was actually really easy to make. This quilt is nice and long, making it the perfect picnic quilt for hanging out with my family. And even though using the fabric panel gave me a little bit of a head start, you can't even tell when you look at it. And that Bargello effect that you get with the different fabrics really makes it look stunning. And I can't wait to use this quilt. And if you want to make your own faux Bargello quilt, just click the link in the description box below and it'll take you to all the products featured in this video. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Midnight Quilter. Whether you're in the middle of an epic show quilt or just trying to get a few minutes each day to quilt, here's to you, quilter. And I'll be back soon with another Midnight Quilter video. Until then, everybody, happy quilting.